And we will get started. Again, I'm going to share my screen with you so we can review when the final is. All right, so the final exam is going to open this Sunday, December 6th at 10 a.m. It is going to close Wednesday, December 9th at 3:20. Moodle will open it and it will close it. It's going to be in the same format that your 4 quizzes have been in. It is timed. It has a 1-hour timing. If you have a resource that gives you more time, please email me so that I can set up that through Moodle. There's no late exams accepted, so please don't email me. Please take care of anything beforehand and email me any different accommodation or anything that you need separately outside of this time zone before this Sunday. Any questions about the final? We are going to do a review at the end of class. You can kind of see it's hidden right now, but I'm going to open that up at the end of class so that you guys will have access to it. We're going to go over that. So it's a study guide of what you need to prepare for that. The first thing on that study guide is review your quizzes, because there's some actual questions that are from your other quizzes. I don't change them around. My goal is not to trick you. So I don't try to take the quizzes and change the questions around to trick you. The goal is to learn the information. So I highly recommend looking at the quizzes that you've taken already, the 4 quizzes, studying those, because again, the goal is that you learn the information. So at the end of this, after we review Juvenile Justice, the second part of chapter 10, I will open this up and we will review the study guide for the final exam, and then you will leave with this opened up, so on your own you can review for the final exam. So any questions just as far as when this is going to open, or any specific questions you may have on the final exam?
How many questions is it?
I think when we review it, I'll definitely open it up and I'll answer. I think it's just under 50 questions. I think it's 40 something, but I will definitely remind me if I don't answer that when we're there, remind me again, and I will definitely answer that to let you know. Good question.
Okay. And I think you already said this, but it's like multiple choice and matching, right?
Yes, it's true, false, multiple choice, and matching. There's no short answer. There's no essay, nothing like that. It's in the same format that all your other quizzes have been.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So what we're going to do for the rest of the class period is we're going to go over part 2 of juvenile justice. This is going to kind of hit more of the court system and what happens when the juveniles go into court. And like I said, and then we'll finish up with the review for the final exam. All right, so what I'm going to do right now before I share my screen with you is I'm going to open up the PowerPoint so that you guys, if you want to open up the PowerPoint, you can follow along. I was doing some editing to it, so I didn't have it open for you guys, and I apologize to that. So if you now refresh your Moodle screen, you will now have access to the PowerPoint that I'm getting ready to share with you. And you can follow along, or you can just follow along with me on your screen. All right. And again, if you have any questions, just unmute yourself so I can hear what you're saying. Oops, I just have a chat. Oh, somebody had asked, is the final open note? Yeah, so if you on your own, you're at your house or whatever, yes, you can definitely take open notes. And yes, don't forget to mark yourself as here, go to attendance to mark yourself as here. All right, so this is part 2 of juvenile justice from chapter 10 in your textbook. All right, so just kind of a review. We're starting off. Remember, with juveniles, it's a little bit different than adults because we do have status offenses, which means that those are offenses that if an adult committed them, they wouldn't be considered a crime. So that's such things as running away, truancy, curfew violations, being incorrigible, ungovernability, or such as something as buying alcohol or tobacco. All right, some places actually classify status offenders, and they call them chins or pins or gins or mins. Not all places do this, but some places do. And so they'll call, like chins is called children in need of supervision, or pins are persons in need of supervision. So like where I was from, we actually had places so that officers could take juveniles. So if you think about it, think if you were a law enforcement officer and you were working graveyard and it was 3 o'clock in the morning and you were called to Walmart because it was open 24 hours. And there was a juvenile that was 14 years old, and the juvenile had just tried to steal some makeup or something from Walmart. And you came upon the juvenile, and the juvenile was in the system as running away. And so you tried to call the parent and there was no answer at the phone. Maybe the parent, who knows, was out of town or whatever, because who knows, whatever the reason was. So you couldn't get a hold of the parent. It was a different jurisdiction. The officers in the other jurisdiction tried to run by the house. Nobody answered the door. So what do you do with the juvenile? Any ideas?
Would you have to call a social worker?
Okay, so call us well, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, so call a social worker. Yeah, that's an idea. So you could say the officer may go, well, I could take him to juvenile to jail, but a lot of times, like me, I wouldn't want to get, I mean, you have a runaway, I wouldn't want to put that runaway in the system because, again, you know, a lot of officers out there don't want to put a juvenile in the system. They don't want to get that started because they understand that, hey, we're going to make mistakes, and they understand, hey, why did this juvenile run away? There could be so many reasons, you know. Is this juvenile running with the wrong crowd? Did this juvenile have an argument with their parent? Is the juvenile having a bad time at home? Are things not good at home? What's going on at home? I mean, there could be so many reasons. I mean, hopefully your mind is running. You know, what could be going on? I mean, so many things could be going on. We need the system to step in. We may not need the police to step in. So this is where maybe the police got called, but it's just the thing that made the system start to get notified to say, hey, the police were notified, but it's just that button that needed to be pushed that needed our system to go, hey, we have a juvenile that needs our help. We don't know what that help is. It could be children in needed supervision. It could be we need some therapy to happen within the family. It could be a lot of different things going on. We don't know. We need to identify that. So we have an officer that needs to be aware, and we may not want to get that child into the system for an arrest. We need to get that child in the system for something else. So a lot of times that officer will say, we just need supervision for that night. So a lot of times there's, depending on the jurisdiction, there'll be a housing unit. So it's not jail. That child can leave. So hopefully that child will understand, hey, you know, yeah, you're not under arrest. This isn't a jail. You could leave if you want. So you could run away from this place as well. But hey, we want to get you help. In the long term, we're here to help you. So don't leave. Don't leave because we want to get you long-term help. So a lot of times the juvenile will leave. I've taken juveniles to those places. So the officer is rolling the dice, and hopefully I would sit down with the juvenile and I'd say, listen, yeah, you can leave. I'm not taking you to jail. I could take you to jail because you stole something, you committed a crime, but I think you need long-term help, and I want to get you therapy, and I want to get those right things. However, if you leave this place, it's a mark against you. And so the next officer that stops you may take you to jail, and that is a mark against you. So I would explain that to the juvenile and say, hey, work with me. It's both of us working together. And so hopefully that juvenile will make that right decision because, again, it's all of us working together. All right. So there's two reasons for separating juvenile delinquents from status offenses. So number one, just like I explained, we want to remove the stigma of classification as a delinquent. So when I stop that juvenile who stole that makeup or whatever they stole from Walmart, I don't want to label that juvenile as a delinquent. I know I've got something going on. What caused that 14-year-old to run away from home? I mean, if I asked all of you, how many of you ran away from home at 14? I don't think all of you would raise your hands. Maybe some of you would. And then if I asked those who did run away at 14, I bet you there's some underlying reasons. And I hope somebody at some point stepped in at some point and said, let's get some help. Now that help will come in a variety of ways. If nobody stepped in and got you that help, I hope you're the reason. I hope you're in this class because you want to make a difference, because you want to come into a 14-year-old's life and be that change, because you didn't get that help. And I want you to be that change for that 14-year-old so that they get that help that you didn't get. We're all that difference. It's kind of like me when I tell you that I was that female officer. That's why I went into supervision, because there was no female supervisors that helped me. That's why I went into supervision. I didn't want to be a sergeant. I didn't get into law enforcement going, oh, I want to be a manager. No, I got into it because there was no good managers, because things weren't being done right, because there was no good mentors. And I didn't want it to what have happened to me happen to other females in law enforcement. So that's how we make change. I get asked that all the time. Well, how do I make change? You make change by having sometimes things happen to you, and you make change by not letting it happen to somebody else. All right, so juvenile courts have jurisdiction over several matters. So they're kind of like a one-stop place for juveniles. So not only do they handle when a juvenile does commit a crime, but they also handle when a crime is committed to a juvenile. So if child abuse is occurring to a juvenile, or if a juvenile is being neglected, that juvenile court's going to handle that. If a juvenile is being adopted, that's going to go through juvenile court. Whenever there's parental rights, so for example, if parents are going through a divorce, or if parents were never married and they're not sure who the father is, or child custody or child support, that goes through juvenile court as well. So juvenile court's handling a lot. All right, so here's a big question. Who's a juvenile? So when I ask you, what's a juvenile? And let me tell you, the answer is not anybody under 18, okay? So I'm gonna ask you a couple questions, because I'm gonna come back and yeah, it's time for the group work. And yeah, I don't want you guys to go in group and have nobody talk, okay? Because this one is where I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna ask you guys, I'm not gonna ask you per room, I'm just gonna ask you singly. So I'm gonna come out and ask you, hey, Monica, hey, Sydney, hey, Alex, hey, Bailey. Hey, do maybe. I'm going to ask you those things singly. I want to know some things such as, hey, at what age can you commit a crime? And you can't go Google these things because it's different per state. So I really want you to ask each other, and I want you to try to get out of each other and talk about this. What is a juvenile? When can a juvenile commit a crime? When can you leave? At what age can I hire somebody to come over and babysit my 2-month-old baby? I don't have a 2-month-old baby, but if I did, at what age can I do that? And let's say that a fire happened and my babysitter didn't know what to do. Could I sue the babysitter because the babysitter wasn't old enough? Or would I be responsible if the babysitter died because I didn't make sure the babysitter was old enough to watch my children? So at what age is a juvenile old enough to have responsibility? Does that make sense? At what age can we charge a juvenile with a crime? Okay, so I'm going to give you guys not too much time, but I'm going to give you guys a few minutes, probably about 3 to 5 minutes, to answer these questions. So ask them and try to use your teamwork, because one mind is not as good as 3 or 4 minds. So get together in your breakout rooms, talk to each other, figure these out, because when you get back, I'm not going to deal with you in rooms. I'm going to ask you one-on-one on these questions. All right. So, Lizzie, if I were to ask you, at what age, okay, hold on, let me rephrase this. If I went to a house and if you went to a house and you were an officer and you found out that one child found a firearm, thought it was a fake firearm, and it wasn't, and shot another child, at what age could that child be charged with a crime? What age do you think that child could be charged with a crime?
Well, obviously not when he's 5, because
Okay, so not when he's 5. I'll agree with you there. Good.
he's a child and he doesn't really know what's going on.
Okay, good, good. I'll agree with you there, totally.
I feel like once they hit like the middle school age, so
Okay.
like 11,
Okay, so you're gonna
they
say,
like
okay.
they really know what's going on, kind of, and they like know about that stuff. So I feel like that was when they should be charged.
Okay, so 11, good. And I like the way you're kind of thinking, how you're talking about that. Okay, I'll go with you there. Okay, Bailey, what do you think? Are you gonna agree with Lizzie on that? Are you gonna go a little under, a little over? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that I agree. We were talking in our group about how, I know in Oregon you can, or it's, I think in Oregon, now I'm kind of doubting myself, but in Oregon that you can leave a child alone when they're 12 years old in the house. So like in the example of like being a babysitter, I know that you can watch a younger sibling when you're 12 years old. But I want to stick around the age of like 16. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're sticking kind of around 12 or 16 within that age range. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Monica, what do you think? Are you going to go around Lizzie around that 11? Are you going to be in that 12 to 16 around Bailey, or what are you thinking?
In terms of when they can be sort of criminal?
Yeah. So if you're an officer and you came to a house and one child had shot another with a firearm, what age would they have to be, do you think, before they could be charged with crime?
In our group, we discussed that we thought the age in order, let me rephrase this. It was our understanding that in a lot of places you have to be above 7 in order to be considered criminal for any activity. So I think at the bare minimum, at least 7.
Okay.
I personally would like it to be more in the teenage years,
okay.
especially for serious crimes like that have serious repercussions. But
okay.
7 was kind of the baseline that we thought legally might be the difference.
Okay. All right. Sydney, what do you think? We've kind of got 11, 12 to 16, 7, maybe in the teenage years. What do you think?
Honestly, I think that anywhere like above the age of like 11, I think 11 to 12, like when you're like in school and you're like starting to think about stuff, I think you should be able to understand what you're doing and the repercussions of it.
Okay. All right. Maybe, what do you think?
We basically agreed with the other group that they should have the repercussions, and no matter how big the crime is, they should have the repercussions.
Okay. Okay, so let me ask you this. So I was kind of using the example of a child finds a gun, shoots another child. Let's kind of go off topic a little bit, because we were kind of going from age 7 to the teenage years. Does everybody know what statutory sexual seduction is? Does anybody want to try to explain what the crime of statutory sexual seduction is? Does anybody want to try to explain that? Because it has to do with age.
I don't know the exact like definitions of it, but from my understanding, it's when someone of significant age that's over 18 kind of, I don't know if seduces is the right word, but like influences someone younger to do something with them in like a sexual sense. And that's considered rape even if they consent because they're not of age.
Good. So Monica, you're right. You're right on what it means. So every state's a little different. So that's why it gets so confusing. And the age, you know, it's really, really confusing because you look at the person that's charged with statutory sexual seduction. It depends whether at what age they are and what age the victim is. So for example, if the suspect, the person charged is 18 and the victim is under 16, you know, then they get charged with something. If they're over 21 and the victim's 17, they get charged with something. So it just kind of depends at what age they are. However, it's just having sex. So if the age is the age of consent. That's the biggest thing. And that's the rub, is a lot of people feel that, and this is where we go with the age, is a lot of people feel that, hey, doesn't matter if I'm 16 or 15 or 14, I should be able to consent and shouldn't be charged. And then other people feel like, well, if I'm 21 years of age, I shouldn't be having sex with a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old because of the age difference. So that's the rub, and that's what's going on with that. So and that's why it's called statutory sexual seduction, is because it is two people having sex. The rub is some people feel that a person that is 14 or 15 can consent. Some people feel that they can't consent with somebody of a certain age. So that's the rub, and that's why there are different levels of crime and different levels of violating that and penalties of that. So the biggest thing that we're going to talk about is, and you guys kind of hit on it, and what I'm hearing is when you talked about the ages, and a lot of states are going to this, when you said when somebody can commit a crime and what age they are, a lot of states are going on not so much the age, but the person, not putting so much a number to it, but more of the person, okay? Which makes sense, because have you ever met somebody and said, oh, they're old for their age, you know, because everybody matures at different levels, you know? So that's why different states are very different, you know, as far as that goes. So a lot of times what you're starting to hear states do is they'll say, kind of like some of you were saying, between 6 and 10 or between 7 and this. Now, some have certain ages, like in Nevada, for a while, you had to be 8 years old to commit a crime, which I never liked very much because it was kind of like us. So what ended up happening, which was really interesting, is prosecutors, even though you had to be 8 years old to commit a crime, prosecutors kind of knew that not every 8-year-old was the same. Does that make sense? Not every 8-year-old had the same understanding of what a crime was. So if they had an 8-year-old that committed a crime, they would have a psychologist or a psychiatrist meet with that 8-year-old. And if that 8-year-old didn't understand what was right and what was wrong, right, that was a crime that 8-year-old had committed. For example, I gave you an example of an 8-year-old finding a gun and shooting a friend. We've had that happen. If that 8-year-old didn't understand that, why would the prosecutor move forward? Does that make sense? If the 8-year-old did not even understand that was a crime. If the 8-year-old mental capacity was that we're just playing. Does that make sense? You have to understand, that's what we're trying to get at. The main goal is understanding that we're committing a crime, that what I'm doing is wrong, that what I'm doing is against the law, and I still went ahead and did it. That's the main goal. So you guys were hitting it, and I'm hoping that's what you were talking about in your groups, correct? that's the main goal, is at what age do I understand that? And it's same with the babysitter. When I hire a babysitter, yeah, I should be aware of the age. I should not be hiring a 8-year-old to come over and watch my 2-month-old. There should be something in me going, okay, even if it's a really, this 8-year-old acts really old for his or her age, still something's not right there. However, I should be looking and asking questions, hey, what do you do, if a fire happens, what do you do? And if the baby stopped breathing, you should be asking these questions. Can this person problem solve? Are you able to, work through issues if they happen? And so that's the important thing. Are you asking those things? Is this babysitter able to do that? And at what age does that happen? And I heard that you guys were doing that. So that is really good. And so even though we kind of have these age guidelines that help somebody determine if a crime was committed, I've never seen a DA's office, a district attorney's office, or a prosecutor have a crime come before them that's been committed by a juvenile where they don't want to have a psychologist or a psychiatrist meet with that juvenile to make sure, if they are going to move forward with prosecution, that that child didn't understand that they were breaking the law. Does that make sense? So I've never heard a district attorney or prosecutor go, oh, that child didn't understand they were breaking the law, but we're still moving forward with prosecuting. So the main goal is to get the child the help that they need. If that child did something wrong, we want to get the child the help that they need. The main goal isn't prosecution with putting that child behind the bars. Why did this happen? Let's move forward. For example, shooting. If a child got a hold of a gun, what is the main issue there? What do you guys think the main issue is there? If a child got a hold of a gun and shot another child, what's the issue there?
That there was a gun for them to have access to.
Yeah, so we've got some issues, right? Yeah, so why was there a gun? Why is there ammunition? It is not easy. Most adults that I know, unless they're shooting a lot, can't even load a gun very easily, let alone an 8 or 9 or 10-year-old load a gun. So why was there a loaded firearm, that a child could get a hold of? So, there's lots of issues that we want to get at before we even get to the age of that. What I saw a lot of with children, unfortunately, was more of a sexual abuse thing where a child, and I'm not going to go into details too much, but was more of a, for example, I got a call of a 10-year-old, I think he was about 10. He was in the bathtub with his 3-year-old cousin, and he had done something sexual in nature. And I had asked him, and this is before internet and everything. And so I'd said, how'd you get the idea to do that? And he said, my uncle used to do it to me when I was in the bathtub. So again, this is something, he was over 8, because this is the time we were at 8 years of age, but this was something that the district attorney didn't prosecute him for, but this was something that we got this child help for, because this was something obviously that this was done to this child. The child learned this behavior. So this child was abused and this child needed treatment, and now this 3-year-old was going to need treatment. So this was not something that we wanted to prosecute this child for. This was something that we needed to get this whole entire family into treatment for because of what was occurring. The main person that we wanted that didn't need treatment at this time was the uncle that had done this to this 10-year-old. Does that make sense with the age? Okay. Any questions with any of this?
Yeah, so in the situation of the 8-year-old who shot his friend, so would the parent or guardian or whoever's gun it was, would they be held liable for that? Like, would they be charged with anything?
Yes. So they ended up, I forget what they ended up getting charged with, but they ended up getting charged because they were negligent in leaving their firearm out. So, and the child didn't get charged with anything. And I know the child went ahead, the child's an adult now, but having issues and having to have therapy because their parent put them in a position of leaving a gun out, and they ended up taking a life that they didn't understand at the time what the repercussions were going to be. So yeah, the parent ended up spending some time in jail, but it was less than a year, you know, just because of what the charges were at the time. It was a misdemeanor, but just sad all around. So good question. All right, any other questions? All right, let's continue on. Okay, so who's a juvenile? Obviously, the range of age is often the only differentiation between an adult and youthful offenders. The state legislature is the one that determines the minimum and maximum age ranges. Obviously, the most common maximum age of a juvenile is 17. Every state has a minimum age of a juvenile. Under common law doctrine, individuals under the age of 7 cannot develop intent. So you're never going to see a state that charges a child under the age of 7. Ever, ever, ever. It's been proven they can't develop intent. So a lot of times you'll see generally states that will say if they're going to set an age, it's between that 6 and 10. If they're going to say when can a child develop intent? But again, a lot of times you're going to see prosecutors generally are going to look at the situation at the individual child. All right, so talking the talk, one of the goals of the juvenile justice system is rehabilitation. And I have to say it's one of the biggest goals. It was one of the biggest goals when I was a cop, and it's even gotten bigger, mainly because we know that when you're young, you're learning, you're gonna make mistakes. That's what happens when you're young. That's how you learn. You don't get to choose your parents. You don't get to choose where you grow up and who you grow up around. And, you know, hindsight's always 20/20. And so a lot of times the juvenile court's the only one there to teach you. And so it incorporates a different set of terms because of that. So how do juveniles get to the court system? What do you guys think? Give me some ways that juveniles get to the court system. So how do they get to the court system to get rehab or get sentenced or get help? We've been talking about it already. I mean, I told you one way. I used to take them.
Runaways.
Yeah, so they run away, and then they go to Walmart and steal something, and then a cop picks them up. So cops take them, right? They get picked up by law enforcement. What else? You think any other ways they get to court or they get into the juvenile justice system? How do they
What
get
about
help?
like CPS?
Good, yeah, very good. Child Protective Services. So you live next door to somebody, you live in an apartment and you hear somebody yelling at their child or hitting their child or doing something, so you call Child Protective Services. Good, real good. Anything else?
Maybe custody disputes.
Okay, good. Custody disputes, very good. Oops, sorry. Custody disputes. Oops, I just put it up there. So here we go. Sorry, I didn't mean to push it. So good, you guys are giving great, I didn't mean to push this, but you guys are giving great examples. So CPS, custody disputes, awesome. Parents, schools, probation officers. You guys gave great ones that I didn't even list here. That is awesome. So yeah, so any one of those ones is anything that happens that's going to bring the courts into it is how the juvenile justice, the courts are going to find out, and then they're going to get involved, and somehow they are going to start helping that juvenile. So good job. All right, so approximately 20% of the cases involving the police are handled locally through the police department, and generally it's through diversion. And it's a procedure by which juveniles are removed from the juvenile justice process and provided with treatment. So intake is after a case is referred to the juvenile court, it is sent to intake, and intake requires an important decision be made. It usually involves 3 alternatives. Either it's just outright dismissed, or it gets informal handling, or it's referred to formal intervention by the court. So cases that are dismissed at intake usually involved minor offenses and first-time offenders. Something kind of like I told you, where, hey, You came in, this doesn't involve anything big, let's just get it out. Roughly 42% of the cases referred to juvenile court are handled at intake. So in many cases, the juvenile will agree to victim restitution, drug counseling, attend and completing school, because a lot of times that's what the judge wants to happen. They just want the juvenile to complete school because they know how important that is. Community service, informal probation. The juvenile is likely to stay inside juvenile detention if they are determined to be a threat to the community. They would be a danger to the community, or they're considered to be a flight risk. Any idea when, give me an example of that. When would a juvenile be a threat to the community or a danger to the community? When, any examples of that, you guys?
When they're consciously aware of the fact they're doing something bad and continue to do it.
Okay, okay. Anything else?
Maybe if they have a record, like they've continuously been brought in.
Okay. What if they went to Ashland High School and they brought a gun and they threatened to come back and shoot up the school, like an active shooter situation? Do you think we should keep them in the detention center? Would that be a good reason to detain them? What do you think would happen if they let them go and they came back to the school? And would that be a good situation? Yeah, so, you know, the court's got to be aware of if they're a threat to the community, if they're making threats, they've got a way keeping that juvenile in. So it just depends what the situation is. We had a bomb threat just in Taylor Hall. Right now, if this class would normally be in Taylor Hall, we had a bomb threat in the bathroom. Somebody called Taylor Hall, said, I left a bomb in the bathroom. They left a note in one of the bathroom stalls. So we have to know, we have to say, okay, are we going to, you know, evacuate Taylor Hall? Yep, we are, because we're not going to risk, you know, a bomb going off. Now, I don't think that's very funny. I don't think the student who put the bomb up, I think this was about 5 years ago, it's very funny. But somebody thought to do that. So, you know, those are called threats, and we have to do that. So if somebody threatens to do something that's a threat to the community, a danger to the community, and they're arrested, then yeah, they're going to be detained. All right, prosecution. So if the prosecutor decides whether to file a petition in juvenile court, the petition states the allegation, so what the juvenile did, and requests the court to adjudicate the juvenile as a delinquent. The prosecutor has the option to waive the juvenile to criminal justice system and waiver to adult court. And then we have adjudication, which if the prosecutor files a petition against the juvenile alleging delinquent conduct, the next step in the process is adjudication. This is a hearing to determine if the juvenile committed the offense or not. This is the trial stage in the juvenile justice system. So a lot different than what we learned happens in the adult court system. And then finally, you have the disposition. So the end, it's the third step in the process, and it's after a juvenile has been deemed delinquent. It frequently involves probation or residential placement. So this is instead of getting a prison sentence or instead of going to jail, it just basically says, okay, you did it. So now we're going to give you probation. Now we're going to say, yeah, you did it, but you know, hey, now what are we going to do? We're going to give you treatment. We're going to give you rehabilitation. We're going to give you probation and another chance not to do it. So don't do it again. You know, we're going to put you on probation for a year, for 5 years. If you don't do it again, it'll go off your record, things like that. And probation is a disposition imposed by the court where you'll get counseling, you'll get community service, and sometimes you'll have to pay restitution if you did something where there was damage. Residential placement is where a juvenile is sent to an institution, a camp, or a group home. And a lot of times this is because where the juvenile is not good. And that could be because they're being abused. A lot of times, unfortunately, all too often, where the juvenile is, and if the juvenile is committing a crime and doing something, they're also being abused. It goes hand in hand. So The judge will see fit to put the juvenile in a group home or an institution where they can also get rehabilitation and therapy. All right, there are two circumstances in which the juvenile in a residential placement may be sent to a criminal justice system for confinement. So one is when the offender commits a crime while in the facility and is an adult at the time, or we have blended sentencing. And so this involves the imposition of a juvenile and or correctional sanctions for a serious and violent juvenile offenders who have been processed in the juvenile or adult court. So a 16-year-old is waived to adult court for murder. So didn't we see that with Jesus last class on Tuesday? The juvenile is convicted at age 17 and sent to a juvenile placement for 1 year. At age 18, the juvenile is transferred to adult prison. So with Marquise, he wasn't convicted of murder, and as you see, they kept him in juvenile court so he could finish his sentence. All right, so that finishes our juvenile justice and kind of understanding what happens when they go to court and kind of that process. Any questions? All right, so now we are going to review. Let me open up, so if you want to follow along, you can, the study guide. All right, so if you go ahead and refresh your Moodle, you will now see the study guide. I'm going to look really fast for you to see how many questions are on it. All right, there's 43 questions on it. And from what I've pretty much found with you guys, it's going to be enough time. It seems like all the time I've given everybody so far on the exams, everybody doesn't even take half the time. I've been looking consistently on the 4 exams, so I don't see that should be a problem. All right, so on the study guide that I've now opened, I'm just going to kind of review it. So I will go ahead and share my screen with you as I review that. So, and like I said, this is now underneath the final exam for you to look. Okay, so review the prior quizzes again, because you're going to see some of those questions on there. Know, and that should say understand the 3 main components of the American criminal justice system that we've spoken about. So that's the cops, courts, and corrections. Which types of, it should times, gosh, I have a lot of typos. So which types of crimes are considered, I'm going to redo this. Know and understand the 3 main components of the American criminal justice system. Which types of crimes are considered the most serious? Property crimes or person crimes? Know the difference between criminal and civil crime. Understand mala in se and mala prohibita. Understand what retribution is. Understand the Illinois Juvenile Court Act of 1899. This is in chapter 10 of your textbook, what we just covered with juvenile justice. Understand the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act of 1974. That's also in chapter 10. Also in chapter 10 is understand the correctional tool LS and CMI to understand if a client is high, medium, or low risk. So basically that's a tool that the correctional process utilizes to look at a client to deem high, medium, or low risk when they're giving them parole or probation. And this is the same one under here, understand the risk need of responsivity, and fidelity. All right, we spoke about several amendments in this class, know what they are, such as the first, the second, Fourth Amendment of search and seizure, know what they are. So for example, we spoke a lot about when we were on cops, the Fourth Amendment, how that has to do with the search and seizure and how officers can pat down somebody, when they can pat down somebody, how long they can go out with somebody. Make sure you understand that. We went over on the quiz. There was a number of questions about that, so make sure you have a good understanding of that. We spoke about several cases in this class. So with the Fourth Amendment, there was a number of cases. You guys had an extra credit quiz that went over good faith exception, the evidentiary rule, all of this. Make sure you know some of those cases and what they mean. And then again, we spoke a lot about the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, so I already went over that. Understand the burden of proof in a criminal case and what the burden of proof is in a civil case. Know what the due process and crime control models approach to crime are. Understand what the definition of criminology and who the founding father of criminology is. Understand what the micro and macro theories of crime are. Understand what the classical school theory and crime rationality assumes. Understand what deterrence is and what recidivism is. Understand the labeling theory. Understand what a commissioned and non-commissioned officer and civilian is and the different types of law enforcement officers. Understand the Bail Reform Act of 1984. Understand pretrial release programs. Understand the steps and what occurs after a person is arrested. Know about the Court of Appeals. Know who the first volunteer probation officer was. Know who started the parole program. And understand deviance and mores and the interactionist and consensus views. All right. And so, like I said, that is on Moodle for you to review. I will update that with the typos. Any questions on the final?
So this study guide will be in Moodle? Sorry, I didn't hear. I got cut off.
Yeah, that is on Moodle. That is right underneath right where it says final. I'll go show you. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me open that up and I'll share my screen and I will show you where it is. Yeah, so right where it says, so this is week 10. If you go to where final exam is, it's on study guide for final exam. So it's right there. Do you see it right there?
Yes, I do. Thank
Okay,
you.
sure. All right, any other questions? All right, you guys. Well, I'm going to let you go. Thanks for a wonderful quarter. Sorry I didn't get to see you face to face, and I hope everybody has a wonderful Christmas break.
Thank you.
Thank